Hello and welcome to another Eurogamer Newscast. And this week we're talking about leaks. We all know the big leak of the week. It was the Grand Theft Auto 6 deluge of information that arrived online last weekend and exposed an awful lot about Rockstar's under wraps in development project. We'll be talking about that and other leaks as well this week. And joining me, as always, it's Eurogamer's trusty news team. We've got Ed Nightingale.
Hello.
Victoria Kennedy.
Hello.
Ishraq Subhan.
Hello.
And I'm Tom Phillips. The big week, the big story even of the week is GTA 6 and all of the stuff that came out of last weekend's hack. It was pretty apparent from the off that this was not just something that someone had made up. It was a deluge of information, gameplay footage, screenshots, early animation work, a look at the characters. There wasn't any real suggestion that this was not legit. And when Rockstar got into the office on Monday morning and picked up the pieces, they were sort of in a place where they had to say something, and they did. They called it very disappointing that this stuff had arrived onto the internet, and admitted that they had had a hack, that someone had accessed their systems illegally, downloaded confidential information. We really had not seen anything of GTA 6, and only recently had they even acknowledged that this project was, in the works. So seeing all this stuff going on, it really felt like the curtain being ripped back ahead of time, and all of this stuff clearly was not yet meant to be seen. Ishraq, I know you follow Rockstar. What's the sort of background here? Because quite recently we heard that Red Dead Online, they were dialing back from that, and GTA Online obviously is really still popular, but the suggestion has been that this has quietly been Rockstar's main focus, hasn't it?
Yeah, so the last sort of state of play we got from them was that they're sort of pulling all their majority of their resources onto GTA 6, the next big project. And they'll still keep some people behind for GTA Online, but they've basically pulled resources from any other sort of game or project. So, controversially, Red Dead Online no longer is getting any content support. But yeah, GTA 6 was like, they acknowledged it's a thing, and it's their next big thing. But we didn't really hear anything more than that until now, which I think for Rockstar, quite unfortunate, because they didn't get to do it in a way they wanted to, in a manner and in a time they wanted.
There's definitely over the weekend, the response was pretty eye-opening, and I think it came from a lot of people who don't really understand, how video game development works. And, like we can look at that and say, it's a shame that they don't understand. I think there is also an argument that a lot of this stuff is very opaque, and for a lot of people, I don't know if, unless they were particularly very interested in finding all this stuff out, like, they may just not be very well informed. Edwin, when you saw the response, what were some of the things that you were seeing, and how were people reacting to this early footage of the game, this unfinished gameplay?
Well, that's the thing, is that it's unfinished gameplay. It's not final, and there are a lot of people who have decided to be armchair developers and, judge this footage based on something that's clearly very early, and think that they understand how game development works. And it's very clear that people don't understand how game development works. I don't think I understand how game development works. I think there are lots of people who don't. It's a very, very complicated process, and I'm sure that every developer is slightly different. What's really gone around is this whole meme of graphics are the first thing that are done, and complaining that the graphics in this weren't good enough for some reason, when there's clearly a long way to go yet. And I think what has at least been a positive, I guess, in some ways, is the amount of developers that have jumped on this meme and released footage of their own games, which I know Victoria wrote a story about. with all this early footage of to show the process. And I think that's the thing, as you said, Tom. It's very opaque. I think a lot of people play a video game, see that final product, and don't understand the process going up to that. And maybe that's something that more developers should show off. Maybe they should be showing their work in progress so that we can understand that. Obviously, not in the build up because they want to show off their product when it's ready to build up excitement. But maybe after that, it's actually interesting to see the process. And if more people understood that, maybe they wouldn't be quite so judgmental about it and understand that this is a creative process. It's a process. You don't just jump into a final product.
I
I
mean,
suppose it's like with films and things, because obviously quite often if you get a film release, you get like behind the scenes extras and you see all the green screen, etc. going on. Like it's quite obvious with films that what you see is not the process, which obviously we don't get in the same way as with a game.
my initial reaction was to like the feedback saying that, oh, this looks really poor, or this doesn't look very good. 'Cause I think it's sort of stereotypical of like the arrogance of the video game community, like they think they know everything. Like games aren't magically just pop out of nowhere, polished and perfect. You know, video game development is difficult. But then there is, of course, the other side that this industry is very opaque. So maybe publishers and developers should be a bit more open about the development process, so that the average consumer understands what it's like to make a video game. Um, yeah, it's still it's a difficult thing, right? Because when you do reveal, I think Ubisoft knowledge said something around this where they were like, when you show off early gameplay footage or development footage, people are very quick to judge, right? So if something's a bit rough around the edges, it kind of puts people off, which is why I can understand why publishers and developers don't want to show off early footage of their game, that they work really hard on.
At the same time, though, I don't feel that people should have to show their work in progress. I mean, can you imagine if we sort of showed all of Eurogamer's readers the work in progress that we do formatting an article? Like,
No thanks.
No,
yeah, no, please, like, we don't want to do that. But I think it's a shame they might feel they have to because of this backlash. Like, people
Yeah,
don't necessarily have to know the ins and outs.
I don't think we're saying that the backlash that we saw last weekend to the GTA League stuff was Rockstar's fault for not being more open about its development. And Victoria, you did that great article summarizing all of those other developers that shared their own work in progress footage in support of Rockstar to say, yeah, look, our games look pretty cruddy several months, if not years out from release 2. And GTA 6, we're not expecting that in 2023. It's at least 2 years out still, I would say. I guess if there is a positive to come from it, it is that nice feeling from the development community of sort of solidarity, because these things are incredibly damaging. And, Rockstar's working on this game in its own time, and it should feel like it should be able to share its stuff when it feels it's necessary. And 2 years out from a project, that's not the right time, is it? Like, Victoria, I don't know if you want to chip in, but like you've seen obviously stuff with Naughty Dog come out, and even 6 months from the launch of a game, there's just some things that you would never show, like story details.
Well, definitely. I mean, I think Naughty Dog's another big one that we've obviously had recently, and that obviously resulted in Last of Us Part 2 getting very, very negative press because of the fact that some story details were released early.
Which were wrong, a lot of those story details, right?
There were a lot that were wrong. There were obviously some aspects that were correct. But I think this is another sort of aspect of the leaks. Like, not only is it damaging for people who've been working hard on this game, but also, like, I remember Laura Bailey, who's an actress in The Last of Us, she and her family got death threats because of it. So, there's a whole, like, domino effect of these leaks, which maybe people, when they're leaking the footage, might not consider. I don't know. But one thing that did frustrate me a little bit yesterday when I wrote that article, and I love that there have been so many people sort of showing that this is just game development, this is normal. But at the same time, a lot of the things that were being shown were things that you could find on the internet already if you wanted to. So it's not like the information about how a game is made is not out there. So for example, the Uncharted 4 clip that I shared yesterday was reshared by Kurt from Naughty Dog yesterday. But the tweet that he reshared was from like 2017. This information is out there. If you want to know how a game is made, you could find it.
I think context is key, and with Naughty Dog, and some of the awful things that were said about what people thought, in some cases wrongly, was going to be the story, or what certain characters were going to be like. You're viewing that not in the context of playing a not perfectly crafted, but like brilliantly crafted 20-hour cinematic campaign, and people are looking at this Rockstar stuff in the same way. Like, why does it look so janky? Because it's not. You're not supposed to see it. It's
Yeah.
2 years from release.
It's a work in progress. Yeah,
Yeah,
It's not something. It's not
you look
something
at a
for the
pie in the
public.
oven, before it's ready,
Someone's
you're
got
not going to
bacon
want
on
to
the
eat it.
brain.
Yeah, I have got bacon on the brain.
I will say though, even from the development footage that I saw, it looked really impressive for a game that's 2 years out. I don't know what people are talking about. Like, I thought it looked really impressive for what it is.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
shockingly,
maybe we should be more encouraged by the fact that this is actually where they already are, let alone, so what could they do with that 2 years more? Like,
Exactly.
For me, it all just ties into this horrible, toxic, entitled player base that just have these ridiculous expectations and expect everything to go their way. And the thing is, if the industry is really opaque, then and there's nothing, then that just builds up hype with like all these unrealistic expectations of something until it comes out and then either meets or doesn't meet those expectations. Or we see the process of that, but then people are quick to judge and say, "Oh, well, it's not what I expect it to be," and I'm not quite sure where the middle ground is here, where players just, decide to just accept things and appreciate that a developer is creating a product and it's their own artistic vision and it's up to them to decide what they want to do, rather than it being judged by people on the internet being toxic. And I really do not understand where that mentality comes from.
I think it's important to remember those people are the vocal minority, and the vast majority of people that will buy this game. And this game, I have no question about it, is going to sell loads and loads of copies.
Yeah.
yeah.
They won't have seen this, and even if they did, I don't think they have that sort of mentality of saying, "Well, this looks like utter crap," because of course it's work in progress. So I'm not going to buy this game. It's just people being loud and wanting engagement and likes and retweets on the internet. At the end of the day.
yeah, it begs the question: why leak this stuff at all? We have had a bit of information about the party or parties that are suspected as being behind it. There was an individual who last week claimed responsibility and also claimed responsibility for hacking into Uber. And Uber has since come out and said that this is all now being investigated by the FBI. And this group we have reported previously earlier this year was behind similar intrusions into Microsoft, Samsung. It's I apart from not having the technical know-how of how to hack, I just don't really understand it. I understand wanting to know this stuff. Like, I am curious what GTA 6 looks like, but to then like spread it all online, and I mean, is that just clout chasing? Like, we've not heard from this individual as to what the reason is they're doing this. Is
So
it just
you
because they can?
I think with this
usually
individual, though, we should also bear in mind their situation, which, that they're a 16-year-old with autism. And I, I think with this particular situation, there's definitely more about, I don't think this is necessarily going to be a clout chasing situation for them.
well, I think because this person's repeat offended, the way, as far as I understand, the law works is when you're found guilty of a cybercrime like this, you are basically banned from using any sort of electronic equipment, especially access to the internet, for the rest of your life. And given that if this person, as allegedly looks like, has hacked multiple platforms, Uber as well, there are going to be some serious implications for this person. But I'm going to say, just in general, hackers do this sort of things generally because part of it is cloud, but I think also there's also the sort of the ransom you can sometimes put from these companies saying that we've stolen this much information. If you don't give us however many bitcoins, we'll leak more information. So there's also the monetary incentive for doing these sort of things.
Yeah, there was a tweet last week or at the weekend which suggested that the person who had hacked this stuff was seeking to talk to Rockstar and make some kind of a deal. There was also some suggestion that the source code for GTA 5 had been placed up for sale. We haven't been able to independently verify that those things happened. There was a lot of confusion last weekend as all of this stuff was coming out, but that was reported by some people that this sort of stuff had happened. So maybe we'll find out more. It is a confusing picture, and certainly the circumstances of this person in particular are make it, yeah, a very odd situation. When we reported back earlier this year on some of the earlier hacks that they'd done, there was some quotes that were published by BBC News by this person's father, who was completely clueless, they said, about all of this happening, and that they would keep their son away from computers from here on out. I don't know if they've done a good job of that, but that seems like good advice going forward. Moving on, I think the other big leak story of the week. Well, we know this was down to clout chasing because they came out and said it.
Yeah, this one I have less sympathy for.
Yes.
It's an interesting one because, so obviously, if you follow the newscast, you'll know that I went to Ubisoft a couple of weeks ago to interview people like their CEO, Yves Guillemot, and the boss of Assassin's Creed, Mark Alexis Cote, about their upcoming announcements, which they made during the Ubisoft Forward presentation. And prior to that trip, a bunch of media were shown the Assassin's Creed part of that presentation, basically so that everybody could prepare features and we could put questions to some of the Mirage developers ahead of time. And lo and behold, like the day after that presentation to press, a bunch of it appeared on the internet, and it was pretty clear that someone who had gone and attended, and there's probably like 50 journalists from around the world who had seen that presentation at that point. One of them had either leaked it themselves or told someone else who had then leaked it, which is extremely frustrating for Ubisoft, I would imagine. It's frustrating for me as a journalist because, like at that point, I could have spent 2 or 3 hours like interviewing people trying to find out stuff. But, as soon as Assassin's Creed Mirage leaked appears on the internet, that's the thing that people will care about. And then it takes away from the surprise of the game being announced and all of that coverage that we've worked on appearing at the same time. It just devalues all of that. Anyway, the Real Insider. What do we know about the Real Insider, Ishraq?
Me personally, not much. I actually didn't hear of him before this whole thing happened, which I think was part of the reason why he did it. I mean, he did seem like an up and coming YouTuber and games journalist, but he had an alt account where he basically put out leaks, and I think eventually this is always happens to people with old Twitter accounts. He tweeted something with the wrong account, and he was outed. Which was
He responded to a follower of the Real Insider from his main account, which is Dan Allen on YouTube, and people immediately realized, like, oh, you're responding to, like, Dan Allen is responding to this message sent to the Real Insider's Twitter account. Does that mean that the Real Insider is Dan Allen and he's just got his TweetDeck columns mixed up? Yes.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
This made me very, very angry. And I've been angry. I'm angry a lot of the time, clearly. But, like, the fact that it is just, like, when these people, such as Dan Allen or The Insider, whoever, are leaking information, they're just jumping the gun. And that really frustrates me because it takes away from all the other, like you said, Tom, you had worked hard on your interviews and things, and you had got this whole piece that you had ready to go for the embargo. And then you said, I'm going to have to do some rewriting because it's out there now. Like, this isn't our news anymore. And it's just, I just think that's unexcusable.
Yeah. It's less about the leak, isn't it? It's about, it's unfair to everyone else that had the same embargo. You know, your fellow colleague, your fellow journalist, like, yeah, it's. I don't understand what goes through someone's head when they do something like that.
Well, he said
It's for
it
the
was chasing the
clout and for
clout.
the
Yeah.
and for the buzz, and it's not good journalism. Like, our job as journalists is to uncover stories and to report on things that deserve to be in the public eye, whether that be, you know, bad wrongdoings in companies or whatever else it might be. That's good investigative journalism to do that. If it's just, oh, here's the name of something that everyone else is going to find out tomorrow, and I'm going to be an asshole and do it a day early, that's not journalism. That's just you being a narcissistic whatever. And it's selfish is what it is. It's utterly selfish. And you know, yes, we have embargoes, and maybe it's part of the marketing plan to release these things, but you play along because, well, not even play along. It's just, that's our job, to disseminate information.
Well, you
And
agreed to it. He agreed to it.
exactly. So just do your job properly. Don't jump the gun just because you want to be cool. That's awful.
It is
Not
bizarre.
only that, but he was lying to people. He mentioned Silent Hill and Metal Gear Solid remake leaks, which was all he, in his words, all lies, bullshit, secondhand comments. Half the posts were educated guesses. He leaked the fact that God of War was going to be in the recent Sony State of Play presentation because he just saw that Christopher Judge, the Kratos' actor, was tweeting about it and made the guess that God of War would be there in a presentation 3 months before the game's release. Shock horror. But it's incredibly frustrating to hear.
Because all that stuff ties in with this setting up of unrealistic expectations for people, which is why then they get annoyed with GTA. Like, it kind of all ties in with that, and it then ruins these things for developers, because then Sony have a state of play and everyone's like, oh, there's going to be Metal Gear and there's going to be Silent Hill. None of those things come up, and then everyone goes, right, well, that was a terrible state of play. It's like, well, maybe just appreciate what was there as opposed to what wasn't there, because some idiot on the internet made up a lie that you decided to believe.
Yep. Saw exactly that, Ed. Saw exactly the same thing with Nintendo Direct. You know, they announced Pikmin 4, for goodness sake. And they showed Breath of the Wild 2, Tears of the Kingdom, and people were still like, where's Wind Waker? You know, Nintendo had never said Wind Waker's coming, never even hinted that Wind Waker is coming, but that was the response because the leaks had suggested.
On the other hand, I think everyone needs to take these leaks with a grain of salt, right? They are leaks. They're not confirmed information. You know, if you're going to believe that stuff, well, shame on you, to be honest. And the other hand, I think the other part of it is, I'm very hesitant to shed a tear for like big multi-billion-dollar corporations because they didn't get to do their marketing on their schedule. Which is why we also report on leaks when they happen. At the end of the day, it is in the interest of consumers.
We report some leaks, yeah, and I think it's right that we acknowledge that, because we as journalists have to weigh up with every leak that happens the individual newsworthiness of reporting that leak on. And when the Assassin's Creed leaks happened, and someone, the real insider, Dan Allen, posted, here are the things that are going to be announced this weekend: Assassin's Creed Red set in Japan, Assassin's Creed Hexe set in witchcraft stuff. Like, I know that is real, but the main thing is that it's now out there on the internet, and we have a choice. Like, we could have just ignored that, but the thing is, the information is out there and it's accurate, and at that point you're just ignoring it for your own benefit because everyone else on the internet is talking about it. When it comes to the Wind Waker Twilight Princess stuff, that came from, I think we would all agree, a generally reputable games journalist, and I think that added credence to these leaks as well. And it is difficult, and I would love that that some more companies had the chance to surprise us and release things on its own schedule rather than some little shithill leaking stuff that they've been given under NDA. But it's every single story that we report, we have to sort of weigh up, is this the right thing to report on. And there's dozens and dozens of leaks that go ahead, and we're not like either we can't verify it ourselves, or we just don't know who this person is who's leaking it, and you have to make that judgment call.
I think just to touch on your point there, Shrek, about saying you don't feel sorry for the company, the thing that gets me though is like, yes, there is like big company like, oh, it's Rockstar and oh, it's Nintendo, but then I do feel sorry for the people who are in that company, because I mean, this could be, I mean, maybe I'm just being over empathetic here, but like there could be someone like, this is their first big game and they're really excited, and someone jumps the gun and they're like, but that was going to be like
Oh yeah,
my time, and like it's the sort of individuals that I feel sorry for, not necessarily the big corporation, because they can, if you look at it as a whole, like Rockstar will get past this.
yeah. Like, to clarify, like when the Rockstar leak happened, I even tweeted like, I do feel really bad for the developers. Like, they didn't get to do this in their own time. But I just mean in terms of a wider structure, there it is the case that companies do use NDAs and embargoes to like try and get a marketing release on the schedule to like get presents. So so from that perspective, it's hard to be sympathized. But obviously, for individual developers, I'm sure it does
Oh yeah,
suck.
no, I know what you mean. Yeah, I suppose, but I mean that's another thing I think which maybe some leakers kind of forget, is the fact that it's not just a corporation; it's other people's, maybe not their livelihood. I don't want to make it sound too dramatic, but like it is, like it can all boil down to some individuals that you're not realizing. Like you're thinking you're doing this big thing for the internet, but actually, like there are people who are going to be really directly affected by this.
I throughout all of this, I keep thinking back to something that the Assassin's Creed boss, Mark Alexis Cote, told me when I interviewed him in that thing that I went to for the thing that then leaked. But we did talk about leaks because Assassin's Creed always leaks. And I said, were leaks inevitable? And also the thing that they did, which is announced this kind of roadmap for Assassin's Creed for the next 5 years, I think. I said, is this sort of a acknowledgement that things always leak, and a way to kind of be a bit more open about it? Because, thousands of people work on these games. You're talking about years and years of development, and isn't it better to just be upfront about it? And he said, yes, like it always ends up leaking. He said, whether it's a keychain or something else. One year they leaked the Assassin's Creed because some pre-order, I think it was for GameStop in the US, some keyrings came out with the, I think it was for Origins, the Ancient Egypt set one, and it just leaked the setting because this stuff gets shipped ahead of time.
Wasn't it this year the cover art for what's the Mirage came from? I think a Uplay.
Mirage came from Ubisoft's own store.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, it happens.
He said, and I thought this was interesting, that by being more open now about what they're working on internally, by doing that, it promotes a better culture internally for themselves. Because so he will know what everyone is doing because he's the boss of Assassin's Creed. But if you're a junior developer in Montreal working on, they're working on Hexade, which is years away, they probably don't know very much at all about what like another studio that happens to be working on the multiplayer thing that they're working on is doing. But by at least acknowledging this stuff publicly, they can be more open about it. He said internally, the secrecy, all of this secrecy, is toxic. It's preventing us from sharing openly. I want our teams to collaborate, to go away from competition towards collaboration. And that means everything we do internally, I need to make it available to almost everybody in the company so everyone can contribute. And making stuff more available obviously risks leaking and increases the likelihood that will happen. But it challenges us in a good way, and it allows them to seek more feedback, be more inclusive. And I just thought that was an interesting response to leaks. I'm not saying it works for every developer, and I still think that developers should have the right to announce their games when they want. But in a world where leaks exist, and it is just the natural order of, unfortunately, the way things work. It is an interesting response.
I quite like that response, so I think that's good. Like, it does make sense to have everyone kind of clued up, even if it's not going to directly. Like, I suppose it's like us. Like, we have our meetings to find out what Peaches is doing and what Guides are doing. Like, it's just nice to kind of be aware what other members of the wider team
For
are
sure,
doing.
Hmm. I think video games is one of the most secretive industries, entertainment industries out there. And
Why do you think that is?
And is it necessary? Is another question.
Well, I mean, Mark Alexis Koto is saying it's not necessary to the degree that it has been. I think it is because, well, lots of reasons. We're dealing with billion-dollar companies with shareholders that are very cautious. We're dealing with massive entertainment properties in a lot of cases. If you look at, most successful video game franchises out there, Assassin's Creed, Call of Duty, Star Wars, Marvel, these projects. Interesting this week to see the Iron Man game being announced after its existence had leaked, but still very early. Partly, I think, to encourage hiring for that project, but also partly because at this point you might as well just say that you're working on it, because otherwise someone will be like, hee hee, I've got this great secret, I'm working on Iron Man at Visceral Games. And then it, like, instead of EA making that announcement, it just appears on Reddit.
I think as well that secrecy really plays into the whole hype machine, because the more secrets there are, the more people speculate, the more hype builds, the more that gets unrealistic, and it all just steamrolls from there. And I guess to Ishrak's point, do we need that secrecy? If from the beginning companies were more open about these things and sort of said, "Hey, yeah, we're working on this," well, maybe if they did that, people would be even more interested. I don't know, but it's hard to get that balance right, I think, because as you say, companies need to have teamwork and get people involved, but they also want to announce things when they can. Like, how do you get that balance right as a company? And I don't think any companies manage to do that necessarily.
I think it's really difficult.
So when I was doing my research yesterday for the piece I wrote about on developers sharing their work in progress pieces, I did notice so I found a God of War compilation that someone had put together of Sony Santa Monica's 2018 version of God of War, and I gather they had been sharing all of this footage, but just not like, it was more like in sort of specific, like, is it GDC talks or something? I can't remember. But for like specific panels and things, rather than big advertising beats. So I suppose it maybe depends on where they then choose to market that side of the thing. So, I mean, like I said earlier, this information is out there, but it just might not be as, it's not as prolific as, front of PlayStation trailers or something for God of War. Like, it was a very specific chat that someone put on YouTube from a panel. So
I guess the implication there is that this is development footage for other developers to learn from, and it's an educational thing, when actually maybe there are, not necessarily everyone in the public, but there are gaming fans out there that maybe would also be interested in that. And if they knew more about that, then they wouldn't think that graphics come first.
what does come first? Concept, I suppose, but
Yeah.
Spreadsheets,
lots of
Post-it notes.
spreadsheets.
I think that's one thing that we have learnt this week. Graphics
not
don't come
graphics.
first.
Yeah. Concept art maybe, but not graphics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Concept
Well,
being the operative word.
There's no point having a pretty game that doesn't work. Anyway.
I think we've all learnt something this week. Who knows what will happen next week and what will leak next? But I'm sure we'll be here to talk about all of that. Thank you if you've joined us today and made it this far. It is much appreciated. Let's wrap up. Ed, where can people find you on Twitter?
You can find me at ed_knights.
Victoria?
I'm Little Chop Shop Gal.
And Ishrak?
It's ISHRXQ_.
And I'm at Tom Phillips EG. Thanks again, everyone. We'll speak to you next time. Bye for now.
Bye.
See you next week.